Being as how I know that even amongst the most alert of you out there, at times these news items that I have written, with which we began most of the shows, whether they be read fast or slow, I know at times can sound like the firing of a shotgun in a kaleidoscope factory. And in as much as man is capable of analyzing simultaneously data through several sensual inputs, such as you can read and simultaneously you'll be sitting taking notes somewhere and listening to what was going on, I thought it might be of some benefit having to do with the news items themselves, whether you know how it goes, will I get around to saying anything specifically about them tonight or not, if I point out to you in writing that every night there are several general themes running through it. Now, I know that you hear the same word, but just so I thought it might give you something else. Like tonight is... Tonight, the themes, the general themes would be the mind, consciousness, comments, consciousness, and comments, time, thought, and warriors. That's in there. And the mystical. I don't know what this is coming to. It's not funny yet. In fact, it's not funny at all, which is... Oh, all right. A boy asked his father, "Is thought itself the main barrier to a clearer state of consciousness?" "I wouldn't say that," replied the old man, and the lad continued, "Then is the tempo of thought the prime culprit?" "I wouldn't say that either," he responded, and onward pushed the child. "Then is the content of thought the major obstacle?" "I wouldn't say that," came the reply, and the youngster asked, "Then is it the repetition of thought that stands in the way?" And his father replied, "I wouldn't say that either." So the boy gave up asking. Whilst in the midst of his great expedition, a warrior momentarily halted and thought, "I am being blinded by some agent, and it is not without, but within." If to the extraordinary you aspire, and if just being yourself is a full-time job, be it known now that you are underemployed. Neurological update. At any given time, at any particular place, a more conscious man has no equal but himself. Philosophy 901. For eons has it been proposed that man will never comprehend eternity. But this is easily explained in that nobody but man ever came up with the idea of eternity. Well, at least you didn't say philosophy 911. Yeah. One guy said, "My eyes are getting weak," and his consciousness reacted, "Perhaps, but not yet weak enough." As he sat one day, a non-standard poet reflected on how much women should delight in being the only subject men normally dream, sing, and rhapsodize about. He quickly, however, felt the need to abandon such musing, lest it lead him into questioning the general lack of commonly available positive neural nourishment. I mean, after all, even some poets don't like to get the blues. Pop quiz. What do tigers and hormones have in common? neither know the meaning of the word almost. Quiz addendum. Yeah, a mystic too. One kid said to another, "Let's play pretend." And the other replied, "I don't have to. I'm already human and alive." In the world of personal neural television, it's your own comments that keep you glued to the screen. Only those with something to gain by it worry whether they're respected or not. What does this leave you to tell your routine thinking? One guy told his mind, "Would you turn off the radio when you leave?" And it replied, "I ain't leaving." And under his breath to himself, he said, "I was afraid of that." A man wrote the advice doctor thusly, "There are strangers in the woods behind my house." Are you certain it's your house you're speaking of? Time runs on comment. Said one warrior, "I had to stop reading and heeding the thoughts of others. Such was keeping me from seeing and hearing what I should." P. Vines, 803. The reason man is so apt to say that he feels within himself a spark of creation or the stirrings of eternity is because within him his genetics are still alive. As he walked the back road, a man sang to himself, "You always hurt the one you love," and based thereon his consciousness tried to take some solace. Based on his own self-interest, one man talked himself into a corner, then another, and yet another, and ultimately sought means whereby to eliminate all corners. Not only must a warrior be alert, but quiet as well. One day a certain man stopped and pondered, why, when actors speak of roles they wish for, roles they say that are meatier, more meaningful, more challenging, and that will allow them to expand their art, why, when they so speak, do they always refer to roles of villains? Viewers note, this is not only some show business news, but also today's School of the Air's lesson in human brain physiology, commonly referred to as operations of the mind. If satire and sarcasm are what closes Saturday, irony is a box office that eats itself alive. In all of the arts, it is often all but impossible to adequately define the distinction between real talent and that which comes close but somehow falls short. Not unlike the difficulty of describing the momentary difference between being more conscious and just being conscious. Fact. There is no accounting of the nervous system by the nervous system. Fact. Is that any reason not to try? Correction page. One man put a stake out in front of his house. Okay, his mind. A paid private investigator. Okay, himself. There was once a prince who desired to possess a certain wondrous foreign kingdom of which he had heard much but had never seen. And after extensive study of the many rumors, tales, and purported mappings of the magical land, he was still unusually uncertain as to the proper plan of attack, and approached his father, a mighty warrior king, and asked, "Where should I apply my best forces in this undertaking? To their upper regions or their lower ones?" And after a momentary pause, as he looked first at the ground, then off in the distance, his father replied, "Long also has this question vexed me. Those who seek magic from simple people get simple magic. But, however, simple magic is sufficient for simple people, practitioners and seekers alike." possible. 'Tis possible comment wouldn't be so destructive if it weren't so repetitive. The difference between genuine mystical knights and imitators. Imitators benefit from hero worship. Truth is, real ones do too. It's just that it's hidden from them. Biology 502. The mind is not the only thing you can think with. In an attempt to personally recreate a scene from mystical history, one man stood by a narrow pond behind his house and declared, "Let my people go," and thousands, nay millions of his brain cells made a break for it. For some, ordinary consciousness becomes as a dead, leaden weight. A warrior's distinction between the mind and the otherwise. Those living on higher floors can't beat on the ceiling to get those living below to make less noise. I didn't misread it. In all great expeditions, you've got to know what you're looking for and where to look for it. History update. Though not noted and recorded, the Tower of Babel had 2 levels. The 3 kinds of awareness: the flashlight, the lighthouse, and all the lights in the city turned on at the same time. Consciousness without comment is sort of like movement without motion, sight without eyes, victory without a victim. The true neural warrior is not a ferocious maelstrom, but the calm within one. My description of consciousness without comment, I'm sure, brings to mind, with many of you, a story that I presented many, many months ago. It was about a king who decided to throw a party, and he sent out invitations, and immediately began to get responses. Some were excuses of people explaining why they would be unable to attend, others wanting to know if they were late, would they still be allowed in. He got up to his royal anus in excuses and replies, and finally announced to all of the invitees, "Listen, either come or don't come, but shut up." Oh, did some of you think it was actually a story about a king and a party? I keep forgetting it. Well, how many of you keep stepping in the Ungawa? Well, that you keep thinking that some of these stories periodically are actually about what they say this, about something out there, about a guy in a cow herd, or about a king and a kingdom, or about a finger and a pointing. No. Also, not too long back, I presented an item that said that there were 2 forms of art: that which is constructive and that which is destructive. And it is very easy, and has been done before, for ordinary minds working at the crude behest of life to make similar observations. Perhaps not just about art. They can pick out almost any other aspect of life. They can indeed take an even more simplistic approach and just say that life itself, that the way people live, or that men, other people, that there are constructive people and destructive people. There was a little-known philosopher, really little known. Perhaps you'd be interested in being privy to his ideas. He was originally from Mississippi and moved eventually to southwest Louisiana, and without going into great details, he divided, again, life up into what he called carpenters and bulldozer operators. You don't think that's why he's so little known, do you? Think how easy. You've heard it in various forms. I just wanted to make it specific. Is why I said they're forms of art that would be constructive or could be considered constructive, positive art, and then destructive or negative art. But to make sure that we have the proper common entree here betwixt us all, it would be ordinary people perhaps saying parts of life, parts of the way men live are even parts of humanity. Some of them are indeed carpenters. They might grasp what I just said. There's some people who seem intent, who seem committed to building, to doing something positive in life, like carpenters who get out and build a house, do something. And then there are those that are in charge, or that seem to be charged, or have only the interest in destroying. Bulldozer operators. All they want to do is come around and push down a building. They don't want to build anything. They enjoy that. In a very simplistic way, those sorts of comments are exactly what I'm talking about. But here we come to an invisible river, an unnoticed line over which the ordinary mind cannot step. Because when you have ordinary people, ordinary minds saying that yes, let's take my line back again, that they're forms of art that are positive and constructive and forms that are destructive. An ordinary mind could take that, but then they have a follow-up. They can always point to examples of how this could be rectified in a particular case. In your case, if you went to ask a philosopher, a social commentator, a religious leader, just anyone, if you said, I feel as though sometimes there are parts of life out there, just parts of ordinary life that are just destructive in nature. They just seem to be inherently destructive, and then there seems to be some that are more constructive and encouraging and positive. And anyone with any modicum of philosophical interest that would entertain your inquiry or observation would go, oh yes. And you'd say, well, do you have anything to offer? They would then have a full, down there infinite within a closed system, litany of what to do, as everyone should know. They can say, well, here is what would improve. Here is how you could escape that sort of unprofitable conundrum or dichotomy. That is, for instance, such things as listen to classical music rather than that damned old rap. This would be good for you. That's just an example. Or they could say, you should read more. Turn off the television and read good classical literature of some kind. Don't read pulp, don't read fiction. Or they could say you should attend museums, concerts, or perhaps church of some sort, rather than nightclubs, rather than hanging around bars. Again, using the only thing of any operational, functional interest as a comparison springboard, sane, common, decent, ordinary people. Not outlaws and not the fringes of civilization, not the genetic fringes of life itself as exemplified by humanity. Ordinary people, were they caught up in such a momentary conversation, could not negatively respond to any of the examples I just chose. No ordinary sane person, even should they prefer nightclubs to going to temple, to going to church, or going to a museum. Any ordinary sane person, just reasonably ordinary person, if you told them that, if they had enough interest in such matters to engage you in the conversation to start with, or someone, and they were saying that it seems to me that there are large segments of life, ordinary human activities that are destructive. Their kinds of energies are destructive. What they seem to lead us into, the kinds of ways in which they seem to grab our attention are destructive. They serve no useful purpose. let's say that's an ordinary person, just said that to someone, to a priest, a rabbi, a philosopher, somebody. And the person says, yes, I agree, but there are ways you can handle that. And then this ordinary person went, well, how? And they said, well, for instance, do you watch television? They went, yeah. Well, turn off the damn television. Just go pack it away and get out some of the great literature of the world. Read that. Do you ever go out to nightclubs and stuff? Well, yeah, sometimes. Just stop that. Go to a museum. Go out to an actual concert. Or do you have any interest in religious matters or matters of bettering man's soul and spirit? And if you want, they say, well, go back to whatever church you went to. Go explore other churches. An ordinary person could not naysay that. They could not stand there and go, that's a bunch of crap. They would, whether they operationally ever followed it, would go, well, you're right. It is simply at street level, at the ordinary level of collective society, collective civilization. It is undeniable. No one will say that that's not true, whether they do it or not. But to say that it is lacking is, if I may be so bold as to brag again, I think I have even upped the stakes of understatement once again. To say that it is lacking. Because when it is a partisan idea, and I don't mean to end examples such as concerts, museums, religion, great literature of the world, I don't mean that the examples themselves are in any way flawed. But you understand, we're back to a partisan, we're back to a dance of trying to replace one thing with another. At ordinary level, the mind takes the balance, takes the dichotomies of life, takes the polarization of life as being one-sided in a particular time, or one dance partner, one possibility as being superior to the other. Or else there would not be two possibilities. There has to be either good and evil, if you don't like that, proper and improper, if you don't like that, positive and negative, encouraging, discouraging. And so they do not take any notice of the fact that if they solicit advice as to how could I free myself from pursuing activities in life, spending my time, and I feel worse for it. We're pushing the threshold of ordinary intelligence to even go this far. But you do know that people in passing, life makes people do this. It's like some sort of almost demented foreign key clarion call that you only hear for a second. Certain people, and you go, what? And then it's gone. To wit, and TV Guide will be articles periodically in the midst of which will be an attack on watching too much television, which almost sounds as though, wait a minute, life is getting somewhere. Or ordinary people would say, oh, this guy's pretty sharp. Will almost bite the hand that feeds him. Remember, satire and sarcasm, if that's what closes Saturday, then irony, which that would be, is a kind of box office to that sort of neural showbiz that eats itself alive. You never even get to sell tickets. You think, well, I got that figured out. Now it makes sense. Okay, and you leave. You never get in to see the show. I knew that would be like a beacon of light amidst a field of broken light bulbs. To say that you should, for instance, read great literature or read something worthwhile, than to sit there and watch television. I didn't make that up. You can hear that the world is full of, I'm just using up-to-date examples, full of ordinary social commentators who will point that out. You had people pointing it out in the Western world. Pre-Plato days, they're already complaining about people that will go out there and watch the games and watch the circus when they should be somewhere discussing something important, trying to pursue their own art. This is nothing new, and is far removed from simply art, television, popular forms of entertainment. We're back to the actual polarized energy that runs three-dimensional reality, and specifically the human mind, which specifically feels itself exempt to such a degree that will not even tolerate, will not entertain much discussion about it, because the mind has this great ability that is explainable on a chemical basis, but has this great ability for you to tell the mind, you're not free, and it can think about the words free, like, I'm not free. and go, you're wrong. And you say to it, no, you're not. You are not free. You can't think anything you want to. The proof, as far as a polar-based, a binary-based reality within a 3D framework, as long as the system, in this case the human mind, can hear the accusation or can hear the statement, and the statement limits what the system can do, the mind, and the mind can hear the statement and either go yes or no, that is, at that level, proof itself. It is de facto evidence that it's not true. Or else it couldn't even tolerate it, could not entertain. All right, let me think. You're saying that I'm not free to think anything I want to. No, you're not. You just think you are, which even makes it, might sound to ordinary grammar school philosophers even more viscid, but if you go, the human mind's not free to think anything it wants to. You put that on an ordinary mind, and it's about to strike back. You could make it even more interesting. Say, even though it thinks it is, it can tolerate. You understand? That's the same thing, if you can follow it, as the article in TV Digest or TV Guide of someone in the midst of the article attacking excessive television watching or any television watching. It's the same thing. The human mind can go, wait a minute, you're telling me I'm not free. Well, plus you threw in right after that, you said, plus the fact you think you are. That's part of the trick. The mind can take both of those that you seem to have complexed up the attack by the second part, and the mind can go, all right, and it can entertain it. It can analyze, it can digest that kind of data input and go, and reject it. Or it's aware of the fact it could accept it. But by apparently having that choice, there is no choice as far as it's concerned. It is a fait accompli. You're wrong. I'm free. In fact, I'm so free, I could even hear you say that I'm not free, and I thought about it. I gave it a run around the block, and I went, that's not true. And even if the mind doing this, and whatever human it was occupying, even if it couldn't analyze it the way I am, it is a tacit proof to the contrary that it can drive it around the block. It can hear your attack. You understand? It'd be like, I know verbally that gets. No, it doesn't. I don't know why I keep taking up for you people and treating you like your children. It's not yucky. It's fun. I mean, well, unless you got a real lazy mind and your mind goes, come on, Jesus, I've run all day. No, you didn't. No, if you ran all day, if your whole idea was, well, I had to be myself. I had to do my job and all that, and I'm tired. I don't need this. Boy, you're underemployed if you aspire to anything better. But your mind's not tired. The proof is it never actually exercises. Is why some of this, people do show up or travel for long distances and dying to come and see this, and they'll sit right here in person. Sometimes make it through 30 minutes, and you see them just, I don't know where you can see them in the back, and they just kind of collapse. They look like a 70-year-old man riding in the passenger seat of a 70 Buick while his wife now drives him around. He has a little cap on. It's like just, his job's been taken away, driving the family car has been taken away, and it's like everything's been sucked out of him. And I look down and I see nice, healthy people show up here and carrying one of my books or taking notes. And after about 20 minutes, it's like they look like one of these little old men peeking over the dashboard. Nothing left. The point I'm making is the mind does not exercise, which is not the ultimate point to this kind of activity, but the mind gets no exercise. Just being yourself is no exercise. That's no effort, although everybody says it is. Back to, I'll refer to my own description that there are there is art that is constructive and that which is destructive. The question would then become, where can you look for that which is constructive? And to skate back into the great rink of understatement, there's hardly anywhere to point. Where are you going to point? That's assuming that you follow the first part, that partisan idea, a partisan solution to a binary-based question is no solution. There's nothing wrong with listening to classical music, but to think that that will make you more conscious is not true. Reading Shakespeare over Barbara Cartland or whatever it is, or Jackie Collins is not going to make you more conscious. But do note, should be obvious to you if you've never given it any thought, but it's obvious that even at the ordinary level, what I want to call the street level of civilization at a given time, there has always been the cry, the urging that men should follow certain lines, and we could lump it all nowadays under the adjective of classical or great, classical music, classical art, classical literature. And all that represents is, at whatever time it was written and at whatever way in which you could read it, even if you're not contemporaneous with its authorship, is you read it as being sort of a heralding to a higher level. But it's still the level of city level of just simply be more civilized. Now into it, if you get to the point that we've been talking about, that you can hear the reality behind the kind of mythology, you also understand to be more civilized is simply to be, if you could do it individually, on your own, would be to be more conscious, in the same way I was describing that all of their whines and hand-wringing about, well, I can't be a real Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, if that was the point, it's a lie. It's a childish delusion, because if indeed they can describe what it is, so if you can describe what it is, you can do it. If a man can describe something, it just seems as though it's of singular significance when we speak in religious terms like Christianity. But what if a man says, well, what I want to be is a mason. What I want to be is a truck driver. But I'll never make it. And you think, well, anybody could be a truck driver. No. And he starts telling you, well, I'm working 2 jobs now. My wife, if I ever left town, she'd leave me if I got a job. But all I dream about is, boy, sitting up there in one of those 18-wheelers and playing good country and western songs on my 8-track. I know it sounds silly, but then it sounds to be of a totally different realm for men to try and explain away why they cannot be a Christian, to say that, or a Muslim or whatever, that all they want to be, or a humanitarian, to be a real charitable, humane person. And they describe all the reasons they cannot do it. And that is just, it's silly to a more futuristic view. Because if they can describe it, they can do it. All it takes is more alertness. That's it. It doesn't take prayer. It doesn't take the blessings of God. It doesn't take stroke of fate. It doesn't take God or the center of creation finally smiling upon you. All these many stories within religion and publicly known mystical traditions that all seems to be a matter of happenstance or a matter of gifts from the gods. But primarily, when all else fails, the reason we cannot, they say, is because everybody knows the simple human frailty, the imperfection of man. And there you go. That explains it. But that's no explanation. If you can describe whatever it is, I want to be a snackum, and you can describe what it is, then if you can't do it, don't start saying, well, God has it in for snackums, or it's an idea whose time has not come. If you can describe it, and you can say, if I say, well, what would be a snackum? And you describe it, there's only one reason you cannot do what you described. You're not alert enough. That's all. You can love your fellow man. You can refrain from hating your neighbor. All you got to do is remember to do it. Because all the other descriptions of, well, Satan distracted me, or I weakened. Carnal desires overcame my best intentions. You weren't alert. Face it. Forgot to do it. Now, which may I refer you back, since it didn't start off the evening very well. My king and his invitations to this great party decided to invite everybody that, either everybody or everybody that he wanted to see, that he thought would be worthwhile. And they all began to explain they were going to be late, they couldn't make it. And he finally, I think my original version, that he told them all, but at least he thought, but to make the story, he told them, listen, on his answering machine at the palace, he just put a recorded message to everybody. He said, the invitation was for real, it was serious, but just either come or don't come, but spare me this shit. You know, don't call, don't say anything. That's either come or don't come, bye. And that was it. Back to where could someone look for encouragement It has always been apparently the purview of religion, of education. It's always been running a close second, if not parallel, and perhaps nowadays to many modern minds, education would surpass religion as the source to which one should look for positive, growth-giving nourishment. And it seems beyond any debate. Again, you'd be absolutely beyond the realm of being ordinary and sane should you stamp and go, don't get education. What a waste of time. You're not going to do that. That would be, by its own operative definition, self-evident that you are not sane and ordinary. It doesn't matter. You could have a fifth grade education yourself. But again, if you had managed, if you were in some way now in the middle, the mainstream of life, you would still stamp and say, listen, everybody should get as much education as possible. It will make a better person of you. It will make a more civilized person. It will make you into a better puppet, into a better Pinocchio. It will make you into a better street sweeper, into a better fire hydrant. It will make you into a better piece of civilization. It will make you into a better cow, sheep, or human. But we're going to have to put the quotation marks back on it, or conversely, take them off according to the way you want to look at it. I'll leave it to you. Hey, that's what freedom's for. Do it any way you want to. Where, though, is one to look for actual... Now we're not speaking about ordinary people. We're talking about people who, in some way, have already gotten to the point that they recognize, without any ill will, that in the public forum, what is readily available from religion to education, everything at the ordinary level that is available is not truly encouraging. It is not. And I guess I should have some hesitation, since we're taping this and it's being shown around, to lay too far on examples, because even with my a priori caveats about taking as being actual attacks and criticisms of any aspect of human life, I could still point out to you, turn on the news, turn on television, go see a movie, pick up a book, and not just a book, not just a piece of trash romantic fiction as they call it now, but many of the books considered to be classical pieces of literature. And what are they? And it's not to help you find fault, as if you needed that. But it's not to try and make you see fault where you saw none before. But if you look at even that which is considered to be, especially in literature as easy to talk about as an example, that was considered to be classical, that you might at first want to say, well, if I were trying to improve myself, and I was trying to take an active hand in this, you're right, I would turn off television, I wouldn't watch all that stuff, I would not sit here and read comic books, I probably wouldn't even read the news magazines, which is easy enough to point out what history and even current events are all the same thing. I mean, this has been pointed out before. They don't see any particular purpose to it. But if you're going to look into the news, if you're going to look into history for some useful lesson, some form of encouraging info, well, there are two possibilities. You're on a snipe hunt, or else if you think you find some, you are a snipe. So don't look, you done bagged yourself. In other words, you're out of the game if you think that you found anything. But even if you go back into what appears to be considered to be the classical literature, the great works of literature, if you look at them in a certain way, and I don't mean you have to try and dismantle them and find every little piece, you simply look at it, and they were written by an ordinary mind, well, when they got published. I end up always trying to be truthful to you. It's like there was no Buddha, not the one you heard about, but there was a real one. So like, I could say there was no Romeo and Juliet. There was no Shakespeare. I mean, there was a real one, but not that one. You understand? I knew you would. So you can read a piece of what is considered to be classical literature. But if you read, I'll understate it one more time, you are hard-pressed to see it as a total work of encouragement. Well, if that is getting too many splinters under your fingernails, those of you still trying to hang on to the ledge of sanity and rationale, then how about what ordinary people consider to be, especially in the Western world, the height, or what should be the height of encouraging positive literature? How about the Bible, the Old and New Testament? Has anybody ever read that thing lately? Or, since you got your wits about you? Taken as a whole. And it's talking about creation or God. Talking about the ultimate source of creation, the God, it. And what he expects of us, which obviously he expects big things of us. That if, well, higher things. But in case you hadn't read it lately and you're tired of watching soap operas and seeing bad slasher movies, go back and read the Bible. Just open it up and read it. If you can see it with a kind of impartial, if you can see it with fresh eyes, there is nothing encouraging in it operationally. Nothing. Well, I'll understate it. Taken as a whole, it is not an encouraging work of art. It is not a positive work of art. There is nothing in there to which a real neural warrior, a would-be mystic, can actually use. Not if you just read it as it is written. So, and even though I said that it was not an attack on it, I assume, surely you know. There's nothing wrong. Entertainment's entertainment. It's all a matter of whether you take what you do seriously. You can have some, silly putty job in life. It doesn't, you got to do something. Let's assume that you're not rich. You may end up writing criticism for some newspaper after all I've said. But hey, it doesn't matter as long as you don't take it seriously. Or you could end up having to be, who knows what. You could have studied psychology before I ever got my hands on you and straightened you out. And here you are, a doctor or a lawyer, and you think, Jesus, what a, Mickey Mouse, what a howdy-doody job, but, I got to make a living, and I spent 10 years preparing to do this. That's okay. But like everything, it's all right if you don't take it seriously, if you don't think you're actually up to something. Okay, back to where we were. If you then try and look for some positive info, some positive entertainment, and you look around at the ordinary arts, and that other people take them, not just entertainment, but that will take them seriously enough. And by seriously, I mean that they will discuss them, that they use as heroes, sports figures. They will use as heroes a fictional figure out of a movie. That grown people will be standing around and they'll be discussing a fictional character out of a movie, out of some science fiction movie, out of some action movie, and people are discussing it. And then psychologists, you'll find, shortly after the movie makes a big splash, they're writing about it. And they're talking about now they're having patients, or they may even say that, speaking as for society in general, that children perhaps nowadays would be better off modeling themselves, taking as a hero, and they'll mention some figure out of a movie. And they'll mention that. They say at least they'd be better off taking this person as a role model than they would the drug dealers in their neighborhood, which again is always the middle class, the heart, the sane part of life. You cannot naysay it. It's not they're wrong. At that level, sure. And you know that. You know it by now. It amounts to nothing to you personally, to a real individual. But sure, you know, as long as you're living amidst the herd, as long as you're living amongst everyone else, you would prefer to be living in a neighborhood that the youngsters had as their role model. Whoever the guy was in Space Wars, or somebody that seems to be, as opposed to them all wanting to go around looking like Daddy Mac and being drug dealers and pimps. You don't live in the neighborhood. If you're stuck there, you'd rather them trying to go out there and be Han Solo or whoever it was and be a decent, heroic type figure. Sure. But now back to, think about what I'm saying. There is nothing available in the ordinary world. Has nothing to do with America, and it has nothing to do with 1994. It has always been this way everywhere. That there is nowhere you turn on television, and other than humor, which I didn't mean to get off on that, but you might also note that every author who's ever said much about his art, all the way from Chaucer to Aristotle up to modern day, they will all say, playwrights and everyone, they'll say the hardest thing in the world to write is humor, if you want to think about that, which is about the only exception of what we're talking about, which is not an operation, it's not a useful exception. It's like between destructive and the possibility of constructive art, humor is sort of in the crack. It's much harder to write than a tragedy. Everybody knows that. I know I won't get around to it, but I had to slip it in about the guy that sat and pondered, why is it that all actors, they get interviewed and they start talking about, well, yeah, I've been around now and had some hit movies and making big money, but damn, I keep playing this same kind of stuff, this kind of light comedy, this romantic lead. What I want to get into more challenging roles. I mean, I'm to the point now I can be a little more selective, and I'm not sure I'm going to take the next kind of movie, just do a follow-up number 2 of my last big hit. I want something that's challenging. I want something where I can expand, what I am, put more of me into it. Without exception, they will mention what? Maybe the interviewer will say, well, what do you have in mind? And they'll mention some movie out, some villain. And they'll say, that's the kind of part I want. Now, that's what I'm waiting that they realize I'm now a mature film artiste, and I'm ready for the heavier part, something that's meaningful and challenging. And they will, without exception, mention villainous parts, that's what they want, in case you would like to think about that. Now back to the main highway. Don't get run over. There is, to skip some of the understatement, there is actually, and never has been, or is not, and never has been, anywhere ordinarily available to look for constructive art. Mm-hmm. That is exactly the closest you would find, which is, again, of problematic consequence to a sincere individual, would be the mystical literature of the world. That comes the closest. Relativity, by the way, about has the same currency value amongst mystics as almost does amongst tigers and hormones, if you recall. So you can say, well, relatively speaking, I'm doing better. Relatively speaking, I'm more conscious than I used to be. You can say that, but we don't have to go on a snipe hunt. We got one right there. Whoever said that? Yes, I'm relatively speaking. I'm wiser. I'm more conscious than I used to be. Relatively speaking. Does that mean that you're more conscious than your uncle? No. Who's a drunk and in a mental hospital? Where can you look for constructive art? I'm going to get right to the more point-blank point. And everyone, of course, realizing this is in no way criticism, and don't let your mind continue, your attention to continue to stay out there, that we're talking about out there. The point is, it is based upon how inflamed you are for this sort of thing individually as to how much this means. But the truth is, when you reach a certain point, you see for yourself, not because I said it and not based upon any criticism of life, that there is no positive, there is no constructive art. There is no constructive info ordinarily available for one reason, using the ordinary terms of constructive and destructive, because what would actually be constructive would be too futuristic. Mm-hmm. It would be imbalancing. It is why an Abraham, a Confucius, a Muhammad, a Moses, a Jesus can stand up and describe certain things, and people go, that they cannot deny it. They go, but not a one of them can do it. Which, as always, fits right in, though, because that immediately sprang up a cottage industry that really took off, namely religion, or purveyors of guilt, encouragers of guilt. It used to be religion, and now, of course, psychiatrists have joined in, your mother. But notice, they can describe it. That's what I was trying to tell you about. Don't, at a very altered level of verbalization regarding human activity, when I said, don't allow yourself, not anybody else, but don't allow yourself to pass over the ideas or pass over the reality that men have continually described better conditions, better states of man, such as a Christian, or a Jew, a Muslim, that you would agree that people who are not even religious will agree that, hey, what you describe as a Christian, like if a Christian is someone who can treat his neighbor as himself, that will treat his fellow man as himself, then hey, we should all be Christians. I'll buy that. But then notice no one can do it. The head Christian on the planet, the most Christian person ever alive at any particular time, will say, no, we can't do it. All we can do is aspire to it. And I said, do not fall for that yourself. There's nothing wrong out there, but now I'm showing you another side of it. Men can describe, minds can describe what it would be. They can describe, in a sense, you got to listen right quick. And maybe I can help from last time in 1 second from our. Men can describe what would be examples of constructive info. The sentence was not convoluted accidentally. You remember I pointed out that there's nothing to find amiss with ordinary religious people, that they are to real religion or real mysticism the same way that professional wrestlers and the commissioner of the NWA or whatever it is, that they are not open to some sort of ridicule and dismissal, because they are to so-called professional, real sportsmen and the commissioner of real sports. They bear the same relationship because all they're doing is playing the role. Professional wrestlers are playing the role of a professional athlete. And the wrestler past his prime, who is now in a suit, who shows up, and he is now the commissioner of Southeastern All-Star Championship Wrestling, and he's there. He is playing the role of the commissioner of baseball, of real sports. Somebody could have the decency to sort of look like, yeah, I got that. A Jesus, a Moses, someone, a human mind will show up and describe, not give, not publicly, not give out constructive info, not give out constructive art. They describe what it would be. There is a distinction there. It is the distinction. The man shows up on television. You're watching him. The show is sponsored. He's getting a salary. And he shows up and he says, yes, I'm the new commissioner of Southeastern All-Star Championship Wrestling. And I want to say that the Mass Marvel number 3, he has finally gone too far. I mean, some of us saw him bring that chainsaw into the ring. He thought he had it hidden in his tights. But now some people saw it, and I'm going to tell you this now. He is either going to give Bobby Bubblehead a rematch for the championship belt next week, or I'll tell you this, as commissioner, I'll see that he never wrestles in this league again. And you could sit there, if you were an ordinary person, and go, what kind of insanity, what kind of childishness? No, no, no. No, no, no. Don't miss the point. The descriptions religions give, which remember where you were, which you would think come the closest to actual constructive information, constructive data, that they are in fact telling you. The world is full of would-be mystics pursuing religions. They always want to differentiate themselves, like Zen monks or students of Zen want to say, now we're the inside of Buddhism. We're just a little more anxious. We are actually trying to achieve Buddhahood rather than just a social occasion, just something to do. And Sufis say we actually want to be real Muslims. We want to be servants of God. We don't want to just show up and go to prayer and go to Mecca. I mean, that's fine, but we want the real thing. And yet they can't do it. But what I want you to see is what is known publicly, that you would at first think this is the closest to a public definition, a public describing, or a public revelation of constructive info. The 10 Commandments, Buddha's 8 ways, whatever it comes, the 8 paths. And you would think that's it, but it's not it. That's the commissioner of professional wrestling. It's one step away always. Another way, I'll try it again. Look at it this way. If that seems a little topsy-turvy, men can describe. Forget the whole idea is, well, I'm divinely inspired. Okay, we'll say that. But a man can show up and describe, here is what it would be to be a better person. A Buddha, a Jesus, Muhammad. They describe it. And forget about the external claims of divinity and etc. Thousands of people, millions of people ultimately, they hear it immediately. And they never even heard of Allah. They never heard of God, Jehovah, whatever. So it's on you. You can't say, well, at any rate, you know, you've got to be past that. They hear the description and immediately are struck by its validity. Yes. And although everyone is aware of this, as always, they fail to see any useful significance. They all, millions of people, immediately respond when he says, here's what it would take to be a better person. I'm going to call it a Christian, a Jew, a Confucian, a Taoist. And they describe it, and millions of people go, just upon hearing it, they go, yes. And not one swinging dick can ever do it. And they know it. And nobody sees the significance of it. Then the question, where could one look for actual constructive info? Can you spell nowhere? There is nowhere. Although it took me 55 minutes, this is a time-saving tip I'm giving you. Not to save 55 minutes of your time, 55 years. How about that? Would you spell that? There is nowhere to look. Life will not imbalance itself. It cannot. Beyond just that was the final metaphysical thrust. Not as much as tape's running out. But on top of that, it should also be able to serve many of you as a kind of release from the sorts of things of guilt, of uncertainty, of looking for too much in life, to simply understand. I'm just telling you an outright fact then, after the 55 minutes. There is nothing, including mystical literature. Some seems a little bit better than others. I know, relatively speaking, if you are that proud of being more conscious than your drunken uncle in the insane home. There is no commonly available info anywhere. There is no art, there is no literature that is mystical, that is truly constructive. It is all to some degree partisan. It is all to some degree partisan, or it would not be popular. And by popular I mean known, that you could find it somewhere, that you found a book and you go, this is it. No, it ain't. You wouldn't have found it. The Warrior Knight said he had to quit reading. He had to quit heeding the thoughts of others. He just had to stop it. It was just keeping him from seeing and hearing that which he should. Does that narrow it down enough? But I was going to say it at least on you might say a slightly lower level, should release some of you or give you something new to consider out in life. From a neural warrior sense, it is all on the same level. There is not that much difference. There is no difference between professional wrestling and Catholicism. There is no difference between painting and philosophy. There is no difference between classical music and rap and country and western. Except at the ordinary level, there is. There's a thing about it. You understand? There is a difference at the ordinary level between sitting there 8 hours a night watching soap operas and watching TV shows and reading something that challenges the mind to try to sit down and actually figure out, well, what in the hell did Plotinus mean by all this? What in the hell can anybody not only understand Goethe, can anybody figure out why he pronounced his name in such a weird way? At the ordinary level, there is a quite real significance, and you would be a fool to say otherwise, except there's not. It's all entertainment. And to take it seriously, to look for more in it than there is simply to distract. If you're truly looking for the secret itself, it is to absolutely distract you. All of this, by the way, has no bearing on this particular television show. So. Is Captain Irony here? If so, has he got my name in his pocket? How about that? He couldn't, since I made him